Welcome back, everybody. This is Rodrigo with another episode of Asheville Real Estate News. And today we are joined by Elena Huggins, who is a wedding planner, event planner here in the Asheville area. And wanted to get her on the show to talk about, well, real estate a little bit in the sense of changes and talking about, dealing with people coming in and out of town, the changes that have happened in Asheville. But most importantly, a lot of what this episode was about was just talking about some of the mental and emotional challenges that go through starting a business, the ups and downs of making changes, knowing when and where and how to pivot. So hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a little different. If you thought it was good, we should do some more of these. Let me know. If you totally disliked it, let me know as well. And we can kind of just stick to real estate if need be. So once again, Elena Huggins, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, Elena, welcome to the podcast. Super excited to have you here to talk, not exactly real estate, but we'll talk a little bit about Asheville at least and stay true to form. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to always start with how did you end up in Asheville? Just there's so many different interesting stories on how people got here and why you stayed. So what's your story? Unless you're a local, are you a local?
I'm not a local, almost a local, but not. So I am a daughter of immigrants. So we came into this country in the late 80s, moved to New York. And then one of my uncles is driving past Asheville, going, I think, to Florida. And he saw the mountains and was like, oh my gosh, there's this place. And I remember before we moved, I was 7 and they were talking about the mountains and we had it in our mind that we were going to have to rock climb to our house or something. Yeah. And so we moved to Asheville in 94, right after the blizzard of 93. It was very, very different. It's definitely changed a lot because when my family moved here, we lived in West Asheville, which was the ghetto side of town. All the poor people live there. Right. So it's definitely different to what it is now. And then we were not allowed to go to downtown because it was all filled with people doing drugs and everybody was on crack. And so I was off limits. And then what we did on a weekend, I remember in my teenage years, was we would cruise Patton Avenue and go just round and round. And that's how you hooked up with people. That's how you met people. Then you'd have the person in the truck or in the car and you'd be like, hey, you, and we'd go pull over to the Kmart, which I don't think it exists anymore. And that's how that was the thing to do. We cruised just the gas and mileage over and over. So for me, I did move. I moved to Florida for a little while, and then I lived in Australia for a while. But I've always come back. There's something really great about Asheville, the eclecticness of it. There's parts I love, parts I don't, because it's getting so crazy and congested. So I've moved outside now.
Asheville's not quite congested, right? Contextually speaking, I don't know. I grew up in Bogota, right? It's city, sit in traffic an hour and a half to go 10 miles, not a huge abnormal thing to have happen. I'm I'm okay with sitting through a red light 3 times. We can survive that.
I guess, because I imagine what it used to be like, zipping to Asheville, from most anywhere was 20 minutes max. There's very rarely that it was traffic, so when you had that, and then when for me now, it's okay, it's going to, instead of taking 20 minutes, it's going to take me at least an hour to get to where I need to go. So, I find myself triple thinking, do
that's
I really
fair.
need to
No, I think that's super interesting, right? Because there's so many changes that have happened. So I've been here 10 years, and even then in those 10 years, you're wow, I remember it being different. Would you prefer to be able to drive anywhere in 20 minutes and not be able to go to downtown? Or will you take the little bit of the longer traffic drive and have downtown be what it is now?
For me, I would rather not be stuck in traffic. I like downtown, but even downtown has become, and it could I think my feelings probably have changed also because I am a mother and I have kids. So when you're thinking in that context versus when you're young and having fun, when you're young and having fun, trying to find a parking spot isn't a big deal. But when you have like kids in tow and like, you're just like, oh, the hassle's not worth it. So in this stage in life, yes, maybe I would have felt different. I didn't feel that way before I was married. I definitely went to downtown all the time.
Right.
Maybe if in life I was in a different place, then maybe I would feel different. But right now I'm like,
understood. No, I think it's interesting to just see like and just acknowledge the transformation or the transition that has occurred and how that does play itself out. So what's been your transition, or what has been like, what have you done here in Asheville, right? Like you got here when you were pretty young, you did the teenage years driving up and down Patton Avenue, and you moved around a little bit. So what do you do now, and how did you end up doing it?
Well, right now I'm in the wedding design planning floral business. I have my own company, and I'm actually, looking always at expanding and kind of enlarging what I'm doing. And I got into it really by accident. Like I've been in the industry a long time off and on. And the first, I probably got into it about 15 years ago. And I basically was thrown into a wedding in crisis where everything just went wrong. Like their decor, it didn't turn out. Somebody picked the wrong stuff. And before I knew it, I was with the bride, picking out what we needed to do, changing it, sending people down the aisle, never having done it before. I just was that leader type, get the job done personality. And so I just found myself doing it. And then, I did it off and on over the years. I did some corporate events. I used to run a nonprofit. I was kind of always involved in some way, getting something done, creating an event. And then got back into weddings probably about 6-7 years ago, and kind of did it for people who knew of me, who requested, who'd seen my work before. And then I did a little bit more work with an actual wedding place because they saw my work and they asked me to do it. And then I went off on my own and just finally was like, okay, I'd been kind of fighting going back into the wedding world, and I finally just went in and decided I'm just going to run with it. And I started just with planning. But before, my first year in business, I went into planning and right away went into decor and design. Then.
And when was that though? So when did you go from like working for somebody else and still being in the wedding industry to being like, all right, I'm going to go forge my own path?
I was doing both simultaneously. I had, unexpectedly and unfortunately became a single mother. And that kind of put me in a tight spot. So I pretty much, was actually so crazy to think now, but I remember being in the tax office and the lady was like looking at me and looking at my 2 small kids, and she was like, you do realize you're below poverty level, right? Because she was looking at my numbers, and I just looked at her and like, I knew I was poor, but I think I just, and so that was like a reality kind of check for me where I was at in life and how, things had, gone downhill. And I was at a place where I was at that time working 2 jobs and getting my business off the ground. So I did that for the first year. I worked 2 jobs and I got my business off the ground. And really, in my first year in business, I made money, which was awesome. It doesn't happen often. And so I quickly, being the entrepreneurial type of personality, I was always like, what's next? So within the first year, was already creating design and decor. And then by year 2, I was, I added floral. Even before the first year was out, I was doing floral, which I'd never done. I was never formally trained. But somehow I just gave it a go, and it's probably what I'm most known for is my floral design. Floral design and the creation of, because why I call myself even a designer is where my gifting really is, and what I do is just how I see. So I can go into a space and within 5 to 10 minutes tell you exactly how we're going to change that space.
Yeah.
Because I see for what it could be versus what it actually is. And
right.
So that's a huge piece of what I do.
So I want to take it a couple steps back then a little bit. And then, so when did you go full time on your own? Because you've had like a brand change, right? So you went from like, is it Elena Wedding and Designs and now you're Luxe Wedding and Designs? Is that right?
Luxe, yep. I changed the name this year.
Okay, and so, but when was it when you were like 100%? It was all you. How long ago was that? Yeah.
That was three years ago.
Okay.
So my first year, by year 2, I was already booking. Like my business grew probably 150%, maybe more. Mm-hmm. So I was already on by year 2.
Yeah. So and I'm always curious about is the reason I'm kind of trying to like narrow down on this is like, do you remember like the feelings, like what was the thing you were the most excited about? What was you were the most afraid of? Because like, obviously we talk mostly real estate on this show, but I think that whether you're jumping into a career in business or in real estate or another, venture, like there's still that like, holy crap, it's all on me now. Right. And you feel like there's nowhere else to turn, but like inwards. Do you remember at all like what that mental and emotional like thought process was going like? And I mean, I don't know if you care to speak about it for a couple seconds or a minute or whatever.
Well, for me, it was multiple things because leading up to it, I got to a place where I was just so sick of struggling. And, I had been in a tumultuous marriage before that. So I had been a single mom off and on. And then finally it was 100% all me. Full custody, everything, all me. And so the moment of that was when I realized I can't keep doing what I'm doing. This sucks. There has to be a different way. There has to be a better way. And for me, it was like even getting into the wedding thing was like, what do I know? And that's how I got like, I know weddings. I've done this forever. Just do it. And so the moment I think for me, when I realized it was all me was when I became a single mom, because that's when it became all me. And so I kind of just, the crazy thing, and I think most entrepreneurs can attest to this, the moment that you're like, failure isn't an option for me is the moment you see the fruit of what you're doing, because you're all in, you don't have a backup plan. The moment you decide I'm going to have a plan B, you have a safety net. And I'm not saying jump in ahead of schedule. I still was working 2 jobs at the time trying to make ends meet. But I knew my business was going to succeed for many reasons. And a big piece of it was failure is not an option for me. So I'm going to make this succeed. And so I invested in it because you have to invest to make. If you want to make money, you have to put money in. That's just a ground rule. So for me, the moment came when I realized, I remember when I first got, like when I was my own entity and I got my first client, I was like, do they know what they did? Do they know that they booked somebody who's never like done? I mean, I'd done so many weddings, but it was just a different thing because it was mine. And so that was like a moment, like, and then I started getting more bookings, and then
you got the momentum going.
I got some momentum going, and then when I realized, like, because I decided like this is how much money I need to be able to pay my bills. So it got to a point where the organization I was working for, I just found myself pulled in too many directions. And then I finally was like, I can actually make ends meet just doing this. And I walked away. And I think anytime you let go of the stability of a 9-to-5 type work, there's always nervousness. But I just remember at the moment I quit and I had to leave, and they didn't want me to, and I kind of didn't want to either, but I knew it was the right move for me. I felt the most tremendous amount of freedom and just like, oh my gosh, I can do this. I can do this on my own. And then at that point, I feel like when I kind of made that move to let go of all possible backup, I went all hard, whereas like even though I was all in, I was aware that in case I had this backup option, do you know what I mean? Whereas this, no, now it's gotta 100% always work, not just, you know what I mean? Get off.
Yeah. You're like, this is it.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah.
from that moment where you're like, oh man, you're feeling all the feelings and everything. How do you remember the first moment where you're like, oh, okay, I got some momentum. Like this is working now, instead of just like the clawing and trying to just make it happen, where you're like, okay, the work I've put in is starting to pay off. It's self-sustaining. I got momentum. I'm doing this thing. And like, yes, this is working.
I do remember it, but at that time, I was in such a crazy season in my life because there's a lot coming at, like just a lot of personal things with going through a divorce and the negative stuff. And there's just a lot of like, for me, I don't even think my mind was focused on so much as the growth, because what people don't realize, and what I've realized now, is that I was going through a divorce and planning weddings at the same time. So the irony was pretty intense, but the crazy thing is I was healing in that process. And we have a culture where we feel like if I give into something, I will take away from me. If I help somebody, it's going to take away from me. And so I think because my mindset was just, I'm helping these brides, I'm just in a zone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I ever had a moment where like, oh, this is working. Because my mind was just like, I'm just going for it. I've put all my eggs in this basket. There was not a moment of like, oh, this is working. Because from the get-go, I had pre-decided this was going to work.
Okay, so I totally disagree with you on something. And I'm curious, like not to, and I also agree with everything you said. But there is always a moment where you're like, it's working, right? And so you're talking about this moment where the business was self-sustaining to a degree, but you weren't really able to recognize it because you had so much other things going on, right?
Yeah.
But there's definitely been a point, I'm assuming, that that's not been the case, where you're able to take a moment and be like, oh, it's working, and that everything else outside was quiet enough for you to be able to appreciate that moment. I guess that's what I'm asking is like, do you remember that first moment where you're able to take a step back and be like, whoa,
you know what?
This happened?
I think, okay, so so I think for me, my moment was probably different then. It wasn't when it was working.
Yeah.
I think we got to a point where I was so busy, I couldn't breathe. And I was like, I need staff, a lot of them. And I think my moment came probably towards the end of last year, where I realized I am too busy to handle what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I was turning clients away because I couldn't handle more. And that was, I think, my moment where I was like, I freaking built this in 3 years, you know?
Yeah.
So, and then when I changed the name of my business early this year, the start of this year was like, it was like I already saw the growth based on like even the track record and what I've had already going business-wise. I'm like, this is going to be a crazy year for me. So I already shifted my business. I was going to broaden it. And I think I had another moment then when I realized this is no longer Elena events anymore. I don't have to be this anymore. I'm broadening, and I became Luxe Designs so I could pull more people in because of the growth rate that it was going.
Right.
And I realized I want to do other things. So I think that was probably my first moment was last year, and then changing the name and shifting all of this, which when you rebrand yourself, it's not a quick, simple thing. It's like a big thing, and I had to go into everything that I had already established and change it. But the fact that I felt comfortable to do that because the business was in a secure spot, and then Corona hit, but that shifted that. But I think that's where my moment was, when I realized like I can really take it somewhere, not just be a one-man show kind of thing.
So Here's the I'm going to bring it back kind of to real estate a little bit. Obviously you have or maybe not even real estate. Like I think this is like the question that so many people wrestle with in Asheville, right? Which is, we have a super special, beautiful place where we get to live. How do you take care of that? How are we good stewards of our great city? And what does that actually look like when everybody wants to come here? And so I'm curious, like with all your weddings that you're doing, how many of them are people who live here? Are they destination weddings? Do you care? Do you think it matters, or is it good that people are bringing money from other places, spending it with you in the local business? And, like, how do you like think through all of those, issues or the questions that they do get asked a lot?
Mm-hmm. That's a big question with multiple answers.
Take your time on it. No rush.
I would say so to answer the first question, most of my clients are not from here. Yeah. And I've noticed in the last 8 years, that's drastically shifted, where it used to be 20% were from out of town. Now it's 80% percent of clients are from out of town that don't live here. So when I get a local, it's really weird that I have one. Like, it's just, maybe it's even 10% is local. Yeah. Okay. So the numbers are definitely different. So it is good that we have that, because the downside of Asheville, as beautiful as it is, it's so expensive to live here. And though everything else, the prices are rising, your pay is not as much. Yeah. And so when I look at, like, even the housing market here, what sells for, $250, $250,000, $300,000, you go to a city right outside and you can get something 10 times bigger, but here everything is so expensive. So for my industry, this is excellent that we have people coming in, because it's actually a really profitable industry. The wedding industry here is a very profitable one. And I believe every state and city kind of has their good points of these are the types of businesses you need to be in this community. Here, real estate can be a really good, profitable business here. Weddings is a profitable industry here. I mean, everywhere restaurants typically are as well, but, like, those are, like, too strong. So in that sense, that's good.
I have a question about that. Sorry, before you move on, I don't even know if you're allowed to say this, like, on camera or anything, and maybe not. I was just wondering, are there any price differences between, like, locals and out of towners?
No, because in the industry I'm in, you pay for the job. So depending on what you've hired me for, you're paying me for what I'm going to do. And I get asked this question a lot for, like, weddings that are small. They're like, well, we only have X amount of people, but we want this service. And I'm like, the service is the same. The workload is the same.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Whether it's this amount of people or that amount of people, I mean, there's a little bit difference when there's a lot of people, but not that much when it comes to the workload. So no, the answer is no.
Okay. So is it good then? Like, obviously you're enjoying the benefits of it. Is it good for the city? Is it good for our local economy to have this discrepancy on where the money flows and where it flows from and how it affects us, anybody who's living here locally? Like, how do you ever, I don't know, do you ever struggle reconciling that, I guess, is the question.
I don't struggle. I think that's the part of, that's the challenge when you're a city that's growing like we are, and so it's like, I mean, I'm all for it. It used to be shut down. You couldn't even move here. They were trying to preserve it. In fact, my parents, when we moved here in 1994, I think they had just opened up the city at that point, because they weren't even allowing people to live here. So, so I think we have to there's a price to pay with everything. Yeah. Expansion, there's a price to pay with that. The downside of it for the local people here is really Asheville has gotten so expensive, it's pushing local people out of here, because you can't afford to pay your bills with the, jobs that are available here. There is not a lot of job opportunity here. So in that way, it's really challenging. I think if you're an entrepreneur and you're really building something, you have a better chance of being successful here. And I do see there is kind of a gap where there's not a whole lot of business professional people here. There's a lot of, like, earthy, kind of flowy music, art vibes people. And then there's, like, the retired people who have a second home here type of thing. But there's not a whole lot of, I wouldn't say we are the strongest, like, families, middle age, type career. I wouldn't say our city is necessarily known for that. We have that, but that's not a prime like you see in, like, other cities like Charlotte and things like that. So I don't know.
Yeah,
it's the price of everything. There's always a price to pay.
Yeah, I think. I think that there's a lot of truth to that. And I think it's important to just recognize that sometimes like growth is a good thing for what's happening here in Asheville, in my opinion. I think it's been overall good, not to mention like, yeah, of course, there's definitely things that has negative impacts, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't do all the other good things that come with it. It's just, I was just curious, just because you get to see all these people coming out of town, but you live here. And I'm like, I'm just, if somebody's hiring a wedding planner, my assumption is that they're also hiring like caterers and food and music, and like that ripple effect has got to be huge. And then you eliminate that, then like how many other, how many industries are, impacted by that. So, but talking about impact, I'm very curious, and you're welcome to say something. I think you were about to jump in. So.
No, I was just going to agree with you and say, in order to sustain what we've got going on, you have to have people coming in because they are bringing in income. So yeah, just gonna agree.
Yeah, good. Well, so COVID. I'm sure people weren't coming from all over the world to have weddings here anymore. What was that like for you? What have you done? What haven't you done? Did you pivot? Throw your hands up? Doing something new?
Yeah, a little bit of all of the above. COVID was, I think, a shock to pretty much everybody. Mm-hmm. I remember when I first heard of COVID, back in March, I had an event and they decided to cancel it. And then I remember I had weddings in April and May, and the brides were talking to me back in March. I'm like, oh, don't worry, this is nothing, it'll go away. And I'm assuring them not to panic, and there's no need to reschedule your wedding. So that definitely took me by surprise. I think the industry that has suffered the most is the wedding industry, because you're not allowed to gather. And so because they put that mandate, a lot of my clients were like, we have family that are, a little older, that are more at risk. We don't want to have a wedding unless the people we love are there.
Yeah.
And we don't want to have, a small wedding when we have all these people that we want there. So that definitely changed. I lost a lot of business this year, probably 70%. Mm-hmm. So that was a hard hit financially.
Sorry, can I ask, what's the 30% that existed? Like, how is it not 100% loss?
The 30%, there were clients that did elopements, and then there are clients that did small weddings. I've had quite a few small weddings, up to 100. There are places that are allowing weddings now.
Gotcha. Depending
on which city you live and who is, kind of overseeing and governing that city, there are some cities that are allowing it and some that aren't.
Right.
Depending on who's overseeing. So the ones there, I've definitely had weddings. So that hasn't been too terrible. For me at first, I think I had a moment of panic because after I started, I lost one client. It was like almost every day, it was like
domino effect. Yeah.
Basically. And I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah, this is no joke. And so, it was shocking to me, but at the same time, like I have been just working and hustling like a crazy person. So, I filter life through, with gratitude. That's been a huge piece of my life. I'm hardcore, like lover of God and Jesus. I'm a preacher, kind of a woman. So for me, that has totally changed everything in my life. So my filter is that, where I'm like, I trust that things will fall into place. And instead of looking at the loss, I looked at the fact that I could be with my kids more, that, I was going, and I didn't stop until COVID hit, and I was just constantly in the mindset of growth, but, as you do. And it forced me to stop and reassess everything that I was doing. And I realized a crazy truth, that I was growing my empire business for the reason to actually escape it. So that was like a moment for me, that I'm like, I am trying to build something so I could eventually sell it. And it was just a good thing for me to recognize, like, what do I want to do? Because there are certain things that feed your financial, needs, but then what is feeding your soul?
Yeah.
So I used to like do a lot of nonprofit. I've always had a hand in it. And it just kind of made me realize, like, actually, there's pieces I love and there's pieces I don't. So how can I restructure this in a way that, is bringing me joy? Because I was working so much and I was unhappy.
Yeah. So are you happy now then?
Yeah. Yeah.
And are you doing anything different, or is it just like a mental shift and you just engaged with the same things differently?
I'm doing a lot of things different.
What do you think's been can you pinpoint it to one thing? Like, what's the biggest difference then that you feel like you were doing COVID, you're not doing now, or you weren't doing and you are doing now then, as you went through that transition?
I don't know if I can give you like one straight answer. I think for me it was re-strategizing and realizing, because when you're a business owner, the tendency is to always work, and you're always, and so I think for me it was like a moment of, I can choose. I became an entrepreneur so I can have control of my life, but I've given my entire life to my business. And my family has suffered. I've just been worn out. And when you're tired, you don't think as good. And I think for me, it was like just kind of taking it back and then reassessing in a way of changing the strategy of what I'm going to take on and what I'm not. And, I'm a public speaker, a professional speaker. So I put myself back into school, to pivot that part and to do something that feeds my soul. And like, I love that. And I got more involved in like nonprofit things and just like, those are the things that feed me as a person. And it was a more balanced way of being like, okay, this matters to me, but these other things matter to me as well. And I don't have to be a one-faceted person. Yeah. And in any business you do, you don't have to just be a real estate agent and that's all you do. Everything's about real estate. No, we are multifaceted people. And sometimes we get so stuck in one identity that we don't explore all the other parts of us that maybe need to get fleshed out, that need to grow, and that need for us to become fully what we're meant to become. And so that was my process for me, is realizing all the different facets. Like, I'm more than just a wedding designer. There's so many other things that make who I am. And that was like, it forced me to just reassess and like, why am I happy here and why am I not happy here? And then, okay, how can I still do what I'm doing, do it in a way that is bringing life to me instead of slowly just,
So you're saying that the only difference you've made is you've taken more time to think, and that's why you feel happier?
I've taken more time to think. Yes, that's the biggest one. But also, I've re-strategized. I've changed. I've made it things more on my terms versus being more of a slave to what I was doing. Because at first in entrepreneurship, you hustle and then you get going. And then a lot of people become a slave to their business. And it's all they care about. It's all they think about. No room for anything else. Yeah. I just changed the way I was doing it and decided I was going to create room for the things that fed my soul and my business side.
Yeah, no, I think it's always an interesting balance. I think it's pretty relative in my opinion. Like, there are some people who are going to be having that energy and feel super happy and engaged when they have that one thing that they love and they just get to go out and do it every day and do a lot of it. Right. And then it sounds like you're a little bit more on the opposite side of like, look, I just want to have my hands in like 10 different things at the exact same time because like this chaos feeds me and I like to go out and get it. Is that a fair, am I understanding what you're saying a little bit correctly about where you're at? Like, you like to be doing a lot of different things at the same time?
Yes, because I do like to do a lot of different things because I get bored. So I like to because I think if you're naturally an entrepreneur, you thrive on creating something and making it grow. And then once it starts growing, you're bored. You need to create something and make it grow. And I noticed this pattern within me is like, I started as a planner. Yeah. I had a design, decided I was going to learn floral. I created an online course. Like, I just kept going because that needed me to constantly create and make something grow. is there. And so
are you ever worried though that you're not actually totally off the, just like, I think that, and I guess this is just something that I've been like thinking about a lot as well, is like, how do you know you're not cutting yourself short though? Like, how do you know, like, maybe if you'd have spent one more year in the wedding design exclusively, for instance, that it wouldn't have achieved something that would have given you a platform for 10 times more than what you're doing now? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how does that balance of like, when do you know it's the right time for you to make a pivot and be like, hey, like, that was really good. I feel totally fulfilled about where this at, and now I'm going to go give energy somewhere else.
Right. I think for every person, it's different.
Right. But for you, like, how did you know it was time to go focus elsewhere?
For me, it came twofold. COVID brought that on because for the first time in a decade, I was going 100 miles an hour. Like, I didn't know a life that wasn't insane all the time. Like, so I think when everything stopped and it wasn't like I had no choice, you know what I mean? I think my nature is like, I work hard and I don't know another way to live because I've always been like that. And so, and I've had to be like that. So I think when everything stopped, I'm like, what am I going to, like, it forced me to realize like the areas that I wasn't happy in. And I had to dig and ask myself hard questions of, why am I not happy? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why do I feel the need to build this? Because I believe that we're all wired to be hungry for something. And hunger is a crazy thing in the sense you will never have enough of it, whatever you're hungry for. So success, sure, every person looks different, but success in of itself, if that's what you're chasing, you'll get to the next level and then the next level, because we're only wired to go from 0 to 10. Okay. We don't have another number. And when you start your business, you don't know anything. So you're at a 0. And then when you learn it and you figure it out and you get it running smoothly, then you have it kind of at a 10 where you've kind of reached your growth, and all you can do is just keep growing. But in order to grow, you kind of have to start at 0 to grow in a different area. And so when you reach your 10 in whatever it is that you're doing, I think that's when a lot of people become stagnant. They that's when you lose the momentum and all of that. So when you're still in momentum, then you're not at your 10 yet, because there's things right in the horizon that you're still getting at and you're learning and you're figuring it out. But once you've arrived and you have everything flowing like clockwork, and then even if you come to a place where, you know, you feel like there's nothing more to really learn because you know it well, then that's where I feel like you've reached your 10. And
but is that possible?
Yes.
Is it possible to get to a place where you feel like there's not anything else to learn?
It's never possible. There's always a place to learn, but what that looks like in your field, you know, for every person is different. So for example, like where I was at as a business, it was going well. I can still grow in it, but I got out of it what I wanted and it wasn't fulfilling me.
Right. But that wasn't because you couldn't grow in it. It was just you were like, hey, like I just don't enjoy doing this anymore though. That was a question. Sorry, not a statement. Is that what happened?
When I say that 1 to 10, I mean it in this context. For example, when I started doing the planning, I figured out the planning. I had it down like clockwork. Yeah. You can stick to the planning and stay in that lane if that's how you're wired. If you're the person that's wired for growth, your thought process is, how do I get more planners? How do I pivot? How do I expand? Right. So then when you move to that place, you go ahead and you start at kind of like at 0 again, because you're learning the wave of the same business. You can stay in the same business, but you either go forward or you start falling back and you start deteriorating. There is no camping in the same place forever. It just doesn't happen. You have to move with the times. You have to constantly, as a business, innovate and keep growing.
So
in that sense is what I'm saying.
So it's more of like you master certain tasks. It's not that you actually master like a business then in general, right? Because there's evolutions, right? Okay. I was like, I don't know if I agree with that. I feel like you always have to like keep tweaking and growing and questioning and being curious. Like, but I see what you're saying. Yeah, like once you know how to do a task, you can repeat it, hand it off to somebody else, go find another task, improve it, build on it.
That's what keeps you like revived and and excited. Otherwise you're like, Yeah, I know how to do that. Yeah, I know how to do that.
Understood.
It's boring, you know?
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I was about to be like, we're going to have a throwdown on this, like, cause there's got to be more. So, what are you the most excited about now then? Like, what's been your biggest like aha moment, that you've gone through as far as like having a huge disruption, pivoting, realizing like, holy cow, man, what I've been doing just didn't make me happy. I really want to make sure that I'm in alignment with myself and being happy in what I'm doing. So what is it? What are you doing now?
Well,
do you know? I mean, maybe you're still exploring, which is fair.
I do. I'm like, I still love it. I'm just changing how it's going to be. So that I'm definitely pivoting on that and growing it in a different capacity, in a different way, where I'm giving more freedom to other people to run with certain things as well. I'm pushing my professional speaking career. I come alive when I do that. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Do you have your own podcast?
Nope. And I don't
Why
know.
not?
I don't know if I want to go in that. I think I'm more of like,
isn't that like a natural, like,
no, it's not. For everybody, it's different. To me, I'm like, I'm more of like, I want to be on your podcast and I want to be on your stage and I want to talk about, I've gone through a lot in life and I've overcome a lot, that if I followed the status quo of what I should have been, I would not be on this earth based on my circumstance in my life. So I feel like for me, all of that hell can't be for no reason. And so I have come and aggressively healed and done the inner work that I am more in a place of, you know, I'm going to come back with a vengeance and help a lot of people. And that fuels me because I love to help people. And I've done it forever. And it's something that I just I just love it. So I'm just taking it in a different way and making an income from doing it. And that excites me, that I can have a living doing something that lights me on fire in a different way than my creative business structured, that lights me on fire in one way. But this, it lights me on fire another way, because with what I do, it's not soul stuff. It's not like, let me help you, you know? So it feeds different parts of me and it seems more balanced where, you know, I don't, you know what I mean? And that approach where I feel like this is exactly, and it's more, you know, I've dubbed myself Elena, the design therapist, is kind of what I've named myself, because you can design a lot of things in life. Choice is yours. You know, I've done a lot of home design and I'm starting to kind of go in that avenue as well. But you can design your home, you can design your wedding, you can design your marriage, you can design your life. There's so many areas you can design. You can design your body. Like there's so many things you can do. And so I think for me, that's kind of, I'm creating and designing, what do I want to see in a way that is, you know, holistic.
Where, you said your parents were immigrants, right? So you're first generation from where?
From the former USSR. I'm Ukrainian.
So as you know, I was born and raised in Colombia. And whenever I have anybody who's from, you know, has like international roots and comes out, I'm like, I'm like, it's curious. Like, do you think you could be doing what you're doing now there in Ukraine, former USSR, or whatever the case may be?
No.
And what, and like, why not? Or what's or like, why is it happening here? Why couldn't you have done it there?
Because people who don't live in this country sometimes don't recognize what they have.
The people that live here?
Yeah.
Okay.
The people who live here, and the people who come here to this country, they come here for opportunity and freedom. And I was born in the former USSR, and my family escaped communism and socialism, because that's never a good thing, and I would happily dispute anybody. But when you grow up in a world like that, everything is taken from you and you have no say. You can't, like, I think about it a lot, especially right now in the climate and all the stuff. I think about it a lot. And the reason being, like, me as a single mother, if I was in Ukraine, in my state, it didn't matter how successful and smart I was. when there is no opportunity because the post, they may not be in technically communism anymore, but the result, the aftermath, my brother went to visit a couple of days ago, and there's lawyers and successful, educated people, professors that are waiting tables because there is no job, there is no work, there's no opportunity. And America, the mindset here is what draws people from all countries, because you can have nothing and make something of yourself. And obviously I'm a story of that. I had nothing. I mean, what I told you, I was in poverty level. Yeah. If I was in that state, in that country, there's just be no way. And so I definitely see that a lot here. Like here you can, if you have a strong enough goal and the right mindset, you actually can make that happen.
So you can like design your life.
You can design your life. That's good. You can design your life, but in other countries, you may have all that, but if there is no possibility, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So
no. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. I'm always like, my dad's like very, always reminds me, he's like, you wouldn't have been able to do what you're doing in Colombia here, like if I was in Colombia. And so I'm always curious because I think it's a good conversation to have. And we've had Bryce and one of his partners on Reed on the podcast, and they wrote a book, 10,000 Miles to the American Dream, and kind of talking about that, right? They were like in Australia and they came here for the exact same reasons, and just being like, like we couldn't do what we're doing in the US there. So always a good reminder. But how do people get in contact with you if they have wedding or design, any questions about anything? It sounds like that's kind of what you're going after and really trying to chase, is to have those conversations and figure out how to create spaces, life, moments, memories, whatever the case may be. So how does somebody get in contact with you?
Well, since I am multifaceted now, if you're looking for wedding stuff, it's luxeweddingdesigns.com. There is contact information. I'm on Instagram, on Facebook, all of that good stuff. And it's LUXE. If you are searching for more like coaching type stuff, more, consulting, speaking, all of that is ElenaTheDesignTherapist.com. That's
awesome. Any parting words? Anything I should have asked you that I didn't? Anything you want to make sure you say that maybe we didn't touch on?
I think in closing, especially like in the season that we're in, I would just encourage everyone to just take a step back, to shut the noise off, rethink about your life, rethink about what makes you, what makes this country great. And it's always healthy and it's always good to soul search, and people don't do enough of it. People don't ask themselves questions. They just ride the wave. They just do what they're doing for a decade, 2 decades. And, I think if we actually took more time and used, even COVID, it was a good time to use the pause to reassess where we are and what things are positive, what things are negative, and just sometimes you just got to shut the noise off and get to that place. And I think a lot can be realized in those spaces, and usually in crisis, creativity rises the most. So
problems require solutions. So
right, and that's where our creative side kicks in brain-wise. I'm a huge study of neuroplasticity in the brain, but so if I could say anything to anybody, I think it's always a good thing to just have a moment and reassess and rethink your place in your life and where you could be and how you can design things.
Yeah. So on that note, I have a question, and feel free to like bounce over it, but talking about all this and like, and not to take away from that ending, but hopefully to add to it. It's like, when you're looking at that for yourself, what are the answers that you're coming up with when you're like really thinking about like, whoa, like I want to design this. Is there anything specific that you're really trying to focus on? Because I know we've talked a lot big picture, and I'm just wondering, sometimes like it's good to draw it into like a very tactical thing that, is relatable.
I think for me, what I'm trying to design within myself is, really going after what matters. because we can get so sidetracked. And when you're, going through crisis, what is going to matter? What you're stressing over now, is it going to matter in 6 weeks?
Yeah.
And just for me, it's more like, I want to make a difference in this world. That's what I live and breathe for. And because that drives me, a lot of other things like living a life of integrity and honesty is so important. And that if you get those basic things right, then everything will fall into place. And I think a lot of people get sidetracked with all this other stuff that really doesn't matter. And if we get down to like the things that matter, then we can really make a difference in our world. We can make a difference in our businesses. We can be better people, because we're chasing after what really matters, not the social media version of ourselves, not the picture perfect whatever, because we've developed a culture where we think if I say it, it means the same as I'm doing it. It doesn't. If I show it on social media, that doesn't mean that's the reality. So I think
very true.
For me, that's where I'm going after it hardcore. If I'm gonna say something about justice, I better well be doing something about it, not just talking about it. If I'm going to hate somebody, I better have a real good reason, not just an idea or something I heard. Like really digging back to that kind of digging and going after what really matters when everything is said and done. Like what really matters? There's so many battles now, and it's like what really is at the root? What really matters about it? So I don't know if does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think that's a great ending point though. Anyways, it's always a good question though. It's like, what really matters? What do you do? How do you figure that out for yourself? And once you know the answer, then hopefully you try to do whatever you can to get as close to doing what really matters. So,
that's a safe way. That's a safe way.
Awesome. Well, no, Elena, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. I know we did not talk a lot about real estate today, but like so many things in life, it's all about mindset first, and then how you manage the mental and emotional game of navigating the actual tactical game. So hope you guys all enjoyed this conversation. Elena, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you all on the next one.